Hi and welcome to this edition of Assembly Calendar. I'm Visscher. Our guest today is New York State Assemblyman Dean Murray, who represents the 3rd Assembly District of Suffolk County. Thank you very much for joining us today. We're going to have a sit-down chat with the Assemblyman over the next few minutes to discuss a variety of topics that he's been concentrating on since the close of session, which was in late June. And I know you have been busy contacting the Public Service Commission, writing letters and the such to attempt to gather some information from them. Talk to us about that.
Well, you know, we've got the headache of power and the high cost of power on Long Island. It's an ongoing problem. It's been an ongoing problem. Back when it was Lilco, then it was LIPA, now PSEG Long Island. It just seems like there's never relief. We hear the lip service. You know, back in 2013, I wasn't here, but I would have voted against this. But in 2013, the governor pushed this big LIPA Reform Act. And I have to say, we had a couple of members from Long Island who were very vocally speaking out against it. Fred Thiel out east and Al Graff were two that come to mind. They both were right out in front of this, and I've been pushing against it as well. Unfortunately, that act did pass, the so-called Reform Act, but it's done nothing. It's brought no relief to the ratepayers of Long Island. The oversight actually diminished, in my opinion, and it's not just my opinion. Just recently, Tom DiNapoli, the state comptroller, came out with a report, and that report stated that that Reform Act has done nothing to help the ratepayers. And again, like I said, in fact, has diminished the oversight, because at least before, you know, the ratepayers had the PSC behind them, Public Service Commission, and they had their power behind them to say maybe, you know, that rate increase is too much or something like this.
Essentially, the Public Service Commission is like an oversight board.
Right.
But appointed by the state.
Right. But now, through the LIPA Reform Act, they took it kind of away from the PSC and they formed the Department of Public Service, the DPS. And there's the Long Island Regional DPS office. Unfortunately, that DPS office is simply an advisory board. I mean, they have no power really to implement their decisions. So it's basically an advisory board. So PSEG basically says, we're going to do this. Thanks for your input, but we're still going to do this. Now, the only thing I've heard from the DPS since it's been formed after the 2013 legislation passed was just recently when they came out attacking the state comptroller, saying, you know, your report's wrong, it's terrible, and you know, that's just not true. You know, I mean, come on. The evidence is there. You ask any ratepayer on Long Island, you ask any business on Long Island, how are your power bills? How are your power rates? How are your electric bills looking? When that LIPA oversight, that Reform Act was passed in 2013, the governor came out and promised every ratepayer on Long Island, he said, your rates will be frozen for 3 years. No increases for 3 years. Here's the little caveat, you know, the little fine print.
There is always fine print.
Always the fine print. The fine print was, we're just talking about the rates. We didn't mean service charges and surcharges and delivery fees and all that. So the ratepayers on Long Island, although their rates may have frozen for 3 years, their costs have increased 3 or 4 times since 2013. I mean, increase after increase after increase. And they just didn't call it a rate increase. They called it a service delivery charge increase or a surcharge increase or something like this. The bottom line to the ratepayers on Long Island is they can't afford it. Stop increasing our rates or our bills. We need to stop seeing our energy bills go through the roof.
And as you pointed out off camera before we started the show, there is no competition.
Right.
So it's not as if the taxpayers of Long Island have competition where they can go to choose another provider.
Right. I mean, you can put solar panels. There's your option. You know, I mean, realistically, it's somewhat of a monopoly for power delivery service. But our problem is this too. PSEG recently did a report. And I will commend them for doing this report. The report was basically saying, here's the status of our current power plants, how they're being used, how we see them being used in the future. Here's our power needs, that kind of thing, which is smart business. They should do reports like this on a regular basis. Here's the thing, they want to keep that report secret. They don't want anybody to know what's in the report.
And this was the purpose of that letter that you sent to the Public Service Commissioner.
Right, asking them to deny their request to keep this secret. if we want oversight, if we want accountability, we don't do it by secret reports. We do it by opening it up and letting people review it, take a look at it, see if it makes sense. But I suspect there's a reason that they want to keep it secret. And that reason is that not a lot of people realize that about 47% of the power that we receive on Long Island is actually imported. It's not generated on Long Island. It's actually imported from Connecticut, from upstate New York, or from New Jersey. And they get the power kind of third party through power pools, if you will. But they get those delivered, like through the Neptune cable, for example, that's one, or through the Cross Island Sound cable. We get it delivered, but the power is actually being supplied by the parent company of PSEG Long Island, which is PSEG Power. So when we stop and we think about it for a second, we have PSEG Long Island purchasing the power that we need from itself. Why would they ever want that to end? See, we had a proposal back in 2010. LIPA had sent out an RFP, a request for proposal. About 45 different proposals came in, and it was to generate more power for Long Island. Caithness 2 was chosen. Now, we already have Caithness 1 in Yaphank. They do a tremendous job, extremely efficient, clean delivery service of power. So Caithness 2, they went through the whole process of the RFP. Caithness was chosen. They started implementing things, getting things put in place to maybe start the construction, build the plant. All of a sudden, late last year, PSEG releases a report saying, no, we don't need any more power. We're good. And they put the kibosh on it. They stopped it right then and there. Now, why would they do that? Well, they would do that because they don't want Caithness 2 to be online and providing power, because that doesn't fill their pockets. That cuts into the amount of energy that they're importing from themselves.
Right.
There was a study done by General Electric that showed if Caithness 2 went online, the import power would reduce by about 25%. So we would go from 47% of the power being imported to about 22% of the power being
And
imported.
is it your argument that then the ratepayers would have to pay less?
Oh, there could be. Long term, there could be a bit of a rate reduction. But I'll tell you right now, you ask the ratepayers, do you even believe that? No one would believe it. No one would believe it, because we are so used to getting hammered with rate increases time and time again, which is why, by the way, the recent J.D. Power survey, PSEG Long Island ranked dead last in customer satisfaction, and that's dead last in the entire nation, because the ratepayers on Long Island have had enough. They've had enough of the promises, and I'll go so far as to say the lies, that their rates are going to freeze. That hasn't happened. So, things like this, when you hear PSEG say, yeah, we did this report, but we want to keep it secret, right away, if your antennas aren't going up, there's something wrong.
Well, you talk about government panels going back and forth. You use the PSEG as an example of that. And of course, the governor's promise to ratepayers that they would see basically flat rates for the next 3 years. That didn't happen. So you have many promises coming from government.
Actually.
And nothing really comes from it, or the government spends a lot of money and really sees little results as a result of spending. For example, the Startup New York program, $200 million.
Right.
Talk to us about the Startup New York program and why that's defunct at this point.
Well, Startup New York, they spent over $200 million. This was we called it the Cuomo promo, because that's basically what it was. It came out during election time. There were commercials all over the place. Keep in mind, it was Startup New York. The main design, the main purpose of Startup New York was to try to attract businesses from other states to come to New York. And the carrot, if you will, that they were dangling was tax breaks. They would say, if you come to the Startup New York zones, which were located around some of the state universities, for example, Stony Brook University, if you come to that zone and you're approved, we will give you 10 years that you don't have to pay any taxes, no state taxes. And your employees will not have to pay state income taxes for 10 years. So, wow, that's great. Come on, let's attract them. Well, would it surprise you to know that a program that's designed to bring businesses from out of state, they ran all these TV commercials, spent millions of dollars running TV commercials. About 40% of those commercials were running in state in an election year. You do the math.
Right.
It wasn't to attract businesses. It was a Cuomo promo.
And according to the latest report issued by, I believe, the Attorney General, not the Attorney General,
Well, they actually did a report themselves. They had to
Okay.
they had to present their 1 year results, or lack thereof, we should say.
According to
76 jobs.
76 jobs. And we had a press conference towards the end of the session just about a month or two ago, where the Assembly Republicans called for the governor to basically wrap up the Startup New York program and bring it to a close. And the Assemblyman called the program, as you're going to hear in just a moment, flashy advertising gimmicks.
And
so
that's
let's
what
go
it
ahead,
is.
go ahead and roll that, and we'll come back and discuss in further detail with Assemblyman Dean Murray.
We're here today because it is time to shut down Startup New York. Over $200 million has gone towards this failed gimmick with only about 76 jobs to show for it. Now let's be honest, if a company in the private sector had this type of return on investment, they'd have been shut down long ago. Instead of helping local businesses that are here already, that have been struggling to pay their bills and stay in business, instead of stemming the tide of businesses and residents leaving the state in droves, the governor created what can only be described as a flashy advertising gimmick. But we aren't here to just complain about this program. We need to enact some real solutions that will change the overall unfriendly business climate in the state of New York and help businesses to succeed and grow and prosper. During the Q&A session immediately following these remarks, we can get into more specifics, but I will say that the millions of dollars pumped into the Startup New York program would be better spent on measures that provide some relief and some financial breathing room to existing businesses while allowing for new ones to grow and develop.
So I do want to correct myself before we let into that video. I did say the Attorney General. It's actually the State Comptroller's Office that put together that report that found that only 76 jobs have come from as a result of Startup New York.
And of those aren't all new jobs. Some of those were transfer jobs. Basically, a company that didn't live within the so-called zone moved to the zone to get the tax breaks. So what we did actually was we took a couple of companies that were on the tax rolls with their employees on the tax rolls, and we took them off. So we actually dug our hole deeper. We didn't help our economy. We actually hurt our economy through this.
So what are the qualifications for a type of business to come in and would be eligible for a Startup New York?
Well, that's the thing. It's not open to all businesses. You know, they determine the qualifications based on what type of industry it's in and so forth, and whether they will, relocate to that particular zone outside the university area or within the university area. I'll give you an example. If you want to know if this is really working or not, a recent story in Newsday. There were 4 companies that had committed to participating in the Startup New York program and locating to the zone off of Stony Brook University. 3 out of the 4 backed out. Why? Well, because when they start really digging down and they see what kind of an unfriendly business climate we have here in the state of New York, when they look at things like energy costs, when they look at things like, the rumors about a possible $15 minimum wage across the board, when they look at things like this where businesses are being chased out in droves, not even a program like this can bring them.
And of course you could say that, what about the small businesses that have been here for decades?
No breaks for them.
Make for 80%, 90% of the employment
Yeah,
in the state.
no breaks for them. See, when we talk about sound, basic programs that'll help businesses, how about we do an across-the-board small tax break for everyone? Or we have incentives for hiring based on getting them off of unemployment. Not just things like this. These are gimmicks. Gimmicks do not work. They look great, they're flashy, they're wonderful in a campaign. They don't work.
We'll have to stay tuned to see the future of Startup New York program. Thank you very much for joining us today. If you'd like to reach out to Assemblyman Dean Murray, you can do so by contacting his district office at 1735 North Ocean Avenue, Suite A, Medford, 11763. You can also reach out to him on Facebook. You are available there 24 hours a day. Social media king, if you will.
There you go.
Always a pleasure to see you at home. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, take care.